guys, Kelly here, and today I want to share with you my recent reads. And usually when I do my recent read videos, I don't theme them, so I would just tell you the last 3 books I read and it wouldn't be like similar genres or anything. But at the end of January, I decided to participate randomly in a nonfiction readathon, and so I decided to make this one just the books I read in that readathon, so these are all nonfiction books. And this readathon was hosted by Julie from the Hungry Bookworm. She occasionally holds nonfiction readathons randomly, like she just will tell you a couple weeks ahead of time and be like, let's read nonfiction together. And she doesn't have any like prompts or challenges. It's just a way to encourage people to read some nonfiction. So if you're interested in that, I will link her channel down below in case she does another one sometime soon. And so she had this readathon going from January 21st to 31st, so it was 10 days, and I ended up reading and finishing 3 nonfiction books in that time. I started another one but didn't get it done, so we'll just talk about the 3 that I finished. And I have a wide range of feelings about these, unfortunately. So I will save the one that I really love for the end and start with the one that I didn't really like. And that was my first 1-star read of the year, and actually one of my first 1 stars ever, because last year when I started rating books, I think I only had one 1-star book, and it was a graphic novel. So this is my first like book that I rated 1 star, and this is The Red Parts by Maggie Nelson. And this is a little hard to explain. It's the subtitle is an autobiography of a trial, and so when I picked this up, I thought it was going to be more true crime. But then it's also a memoir, because the woman who writes this, Maggie, she is a writer of like other nonfiction books, and then she has a family history that she had wanted to write about, and so she's written both a poem and this book about a certain aspect of her family. And that was when, before she was born, her aunt was killed, and they thought that they had the murderer, and they were arrested and everything. And then so Maggie had grown up, you know, knowing that her aunt was murdered. And then later on in life, I don't remember how much later, I think she was in her like 20s or early 30s or something like that, when they found out that it wasn't actually the person, the serial killer they thought it was, who had killed her aunt, because they had DNA evidence of somebody else at the crime. So a trial was done, and since Maggie was at the age of being a writer, she decided to document the trial. And so this is kind of part memoir, part true crime. Except for, it doesn't really feel like either. It feels like a stream of consciousness basically. And just a little mix of everything. It didn't really focus on the trial, in my opinion. Like, when I was reading this, I felt like only about 30% of what was in this book was actually about her aunt and her death and the trial and all that, and then the rest of it was just anything that Maggie just happened to have pop in her head and just wanted to put in this almost like journal type writing. So that's what it felt like. It almost felt like she was just writing in her journal while she was going through the trial, and like experiences in the trial brought up other experiences in her life, and it didn't flow at all, and I just wasn't really interested. It didn't feel like a memoir, and it didn't feel like a true crime book. It just was like a bunch of thoughts, in my opinion. And so I just didn't enjoy it. I didn't really like any part of this book at all. I didn't like her writing. And that's unfortunate, because, you know, I thought, well, maybe it's just because it's a memoir and a lot of people write memoirs that aren't really writers, but she is a writer. Like, she has at least, it looks like 3 other books that she has written, so she is a writer. But for some reason, this did not work. So I had to give it 1 star. I mean, I probably shouldn't have even finished it, but I ended up picking up the audiobook because I wanted something to kind of just have to listen to while I did other stuff. And since it's a shorter book, it was a shorter audiobook, maybe 4 or 5 hours. So I thought, well, that's a good one to just read in a day while I'm doing all these chores and things like that. And so I didn't DNF it because I was like, well, it's not that long. I'll just get through it. But I really did not like anything about this book. So I personally would not recommend it. I don't know who I would recommend it to that might like it because, like I said, it's not true crime and it doesn't feel like a memoir. If you like to read stream of consciousness, then maybe you would like this. All right, now on to something that I liked all right, and that is Simply Clean by Becky Rapinchuk. And this is just basically a book about a cleaning method. And I had gotten this book because Becky came and spoke to a mom's group I was in and kind of shared with us how to like have a simplified cleaning schedule that you can put into your life even if you are really busy with kids. And this is not just for people that have kids. Like, she just happened to come speak to our mom's group. Like, she kind of lays out like when you can clean if you work a full-time job, or if you work a sporadic job, or if you're out of town a lot, or if you're a mom, or if you're just a person that needs a little help figuring out how to make a cleaning schedule because you've just never been good at organizing. And I'm a person that really likes a clean house, but I don't always get the motivation or figure out like how to do it on a regular basis. Like, I'm one of those that usually ends up Saturday morning being like, oh gosh, I have to clean the house, and then I'm cleaning like all day long. And that's kind of her thing, is that like she used to be like that, and she was like, who wants to clean and all day long on Saturday and waste your entire weekend when you could be doing a little bit each day and have your weekend to do fun things? And that's what I want my life to be like. So I was like, okay, I'm going to read her book. And I didn't rate this book because it is actually more like a reference book than something you need to read all the way through. I did read it all the way through because I got the audiobook and I read it while I was driving, because it's obviously appropriate that it could be on while the kids are in the background. And since it was an audiobook and while I was driving, I couldn't really skip, but you wouldn't have to read it all the way through. Like, really, the first maybe half of the book is all you would have to actually read, because that lays out her like her plan. And like, she also has like a Kickstarter of like, if you're starting with kind of a more dirty house, how do you get it to the point where you can just clean 10 minutes a day. And then she also has like a plan for if you want to do like a deep clean at the beginning to kind of really get yourself started. So she has those like 3 plans laid out, and that's the first half of the book. So if you did want to listen to it, you would only need to listen to about an hour and a half, and then you could stop. And the rest of this information, I'll tell you the truth, is on her website. She is also a blogger, so that's actually, she wrote her book from her like blog. So all of this information you could find on her blog, which I think is called, what is it called? Clean Mama. Her blog is called Clean Mama. And so if you didn't want to buy the book, you could just go to her blog and find all the information there. I wanted to buy the book because I wanted something to reference really quickly, because the other half of the book, after you get just kind of her program, is all, like, she has a whole section about how to clean anything. So like, if you were like, oh, the oven's really a mess, how do I do that? You could like look up just how to clean the oven, or how to clean a coffee maker, or like drip clean it, and like just detailed instructions for every single thing in your house. And so I just wanted a reference basically that I could pick up if I was like doing a big spring cleaning, that I could kind of go through like a checklist. She also has a lot of like print-offs that are like checklists for doing a spring cleaning or things like that, and I wanted access to like copy those. And then also she has, the other main thing I wanted was, she has a section in the back of the book where she details all of her recipes for homemade cleaners that she uses with like natural substances so that they're not toxic. And I wanted to move towards a non-toxic cleaning home where we're using more of the things like vinegar and alcohol and stuff like that, baking soda, things like that, that are natural products that wouldn't like harm my children who touch everything in the house. So that was part of what I wanted, was that resource to have those recipes, but you can get that from the website. So if you're not somebody that needs a book sitting there to reference, go to check out her blog. I would recommend at least checking out her blog, even if you don't want to buy the book. And the book is, the audiobook is on Scribd, so if you wanted just a kick in the butt to like start a daily cleaning routine, you could just listen to the first hour and a half of her book, like I said. So I didn't rate this, but I do think it's a good resource if you just need a little motivation and a little bit of way to organize your cleaning regimen. And then the last one is the book that I liked the most, and that was Into the Wild by Jon Krakauer. I had recently read Into Thin Air by him and loved it. It was a 5-star book. It was amazing. And so I was just in the mood to read another one of his books. And so I picked up this one. I actually ended up listening to this one in audiobook too. So I listened to all of them in audiobooks even though I own them, because I found that with nonfiction, I really enjoy the audiobook because I will put down a nonfiction book more and then like not get the motivation to pick it up. But if I have it in the background while I'm cleaning or driving or doing other things, I will actually listen to the entire thing. And so I found I got through a lot more nonfiction through audiobooks. And the narrator for this one was really good. So it helped me to like get through the book. And this one, I did like it, but I didn't love it as much as Into Thin Air. And that might have been just the structure of the book and the topic. So this is about a man named Chris McCandless who back in the, I believe, 90s, in the early 90s, he was a college graduate, and he came from a more well-off family, but after college he just like separated from his family, got rid of all of his belongings, all of his savings he gave away, and then he just decided to become like a hitchhiker and roam the western half of the country and just disconnected. He didn't talk to his family at all. He even made himself a new name and just did it all on his own. And then like his final thing was he wanted to get to Alaska and go into the wilds of Alaska and survive there. And so he went to Alaska, and we know from the very beginning, like even from the description, that he ends up dying in Alaska in the middle of nowhere basically. And so this story is just about his journey in those last couple years of his life as he's going off grid and how he ended up dying because he had a whole plan in place. So it's just kind of like how that ended up happening. And I did enjoy the book. I enjoyed hearing about his journey because it's fascinating when you're like, what makes a person do that? What makes a person give up everything they have and just go out into the wild? The reason why I gave this 4 stars instead of 5 stars is that I don't think there was enough information about McCandless to fill an entire book, but Krakauer managed to do it, and that's what I think he kind of had too much filler. There were several chapters in this book that weren't even about McCandless. He would just go off about other people that have gone into the wild, and I just didn't really care about those chapters. And actually when we got to those chapters, I found myself moving to a higher speed on my audiobook just to get through them because I just did not connect to them. I didn't care about those people. I wanted to find out what happened to McCandless, so I basically like skim read the version of skim reading in an audiobook by making it faster. And then there's a couple chapters where Krakauer goes into a time when he went off to Alaska by himself in his 20s and basically saying, this could have happened to me. I didn't really care about those chapters either. They just weren't that interesting. I was invested in the story of Chris McCandless, and it was like those chapters would pop up suddenly and it would disturb the flow of the narrative about Chris McCandless. So I just didn't like those sections and mostly fast forward read through them. So if those sections had been out of there, I probably would have called this like a 5 because I thought the writing was really good. It was interesting to hear his story, but just those things thrown in, I think he only put them in because he needed to make a full book. And I don't know what you would call it because you don't call it a novella when it's nonfiction, but maybe it would be called an essay. Maybe it should have been something like that. Maybe it should have been an essay instead of a full nonfiction book because I just didn't like those sections. And maybe other people would be interested about those stories, but it didn't interest me. I just wanted to hear this one story about Chris McCandless. And the other thing that I know a lot of other people don't like if you read the reviews, what a lot of people complain about and reasons they give it lower stars is because they think that Krakauer is making him out to be a hero and lauding his attempts to go out into the wilderness by himself, and they think he made these horrible choices. Why are you making him into a hero? But me personally, after reading this, I don't think that Krakauer is making him out to be a hero. I don't think he's supporting the decisions that McCandless made. I think a lot of his decisions were foolish, but I don't think that that would make the rating of the book lower for me because I'm not reading it thinking he's a hero. I'm just reading about a tragic event. That would be like to me saying I'm reading a book about a serial killer and I really don't like what he did, so I'm gonna write it low. It's like, no, I know I know that's a serial killer and it's not a good thing to do, but I'm still interested in finding out his methods and like what makes a person think that way. That's what this is. This is like me wanting to find out what would make a person do the things he did. Doesn't mean I agree with what he did. So I don't get rating it lower because of that. So I do not think, if you were reading those reviews and thinking that Krakauer is making him out to be this hero of going off the grid, I do not think that that's what he's saying. I felt like a very objective, like, this is what was happening in his life at the time and his thoughts, because there's a lot of journal writings from Chris McCandless in here, so he was taking from like his actual thoughts at the time. He interviewed a ton of people that like met Chris during this 2 years that he was wandering off by himself, and so I felt like it was very objective of like, this is just what was happening in his life and this is the choices he made. I do not think that it was like saying that they were the right choices. And it's not for us to judge what somebody else decides to do, even if he ends up tragically dying. That's not our choice, but I found the book interesting. So I gave it 4 stars, and I would recommend it if you're somebody that likes to read kind of like survival stories, or just things that, you know, wants to find out interesting stories about the choices that people make that maybe we don't understand. So those are the 3 books I read for that nonfiction readathon. Like I said, I'll link Julie down below if you want to check her out. And if you've read any of these books, I'd love to discuss them. All right, thanks. Bye.